I think that there were pockets around the U.S., let's say specifically that were, let's say, epicenters. There was the Bay Area and Berkeley and companies that were emerging. You had the Northwest from Seattle, here in Portland as well. You had roasters on the East Coast like Gillies and Don Schoenholt was the founder or owner of Gillies, but also the founder of the SCA. In looking back at the history and doing a little bit of research, I see this, the gas pedal got pushed down really around 1999 to 2000. And then that decade of the 2000s, it became much more authoritative that there was a specialty coffee movement, and it was a movement. It was not just the early, antecedents of what would become, what everybody would know. And anybody that is reading any information about coffee in the U.S. as a consumer probably has an understanding of what is different from ground coffee in a can to a micro lot or a special coffee offering from their neighborhood roaster.
If you're starting or growing your business in these volatile times in coffee and you need a little extra support, our scope of business advisory services may be just what you need. Join one of our hugely successful mastermind groups for support in a group setting, or send us an email to discuss our one-on-one consulting and business advisory services, where we'll work with you one-on-one to solve specific problems in your coffee business. All our services come with a 100% money-back guarantee. So send us an email at support@mapitforward.org and let us know how we can help you today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 1 of a 5-part series that I'm very, very excited about. Our guest on this podcast for this week is Darrin Daniel from Cityful Press Coffee. Darrin, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Lee. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, definitely.
So the pleasure is all mine. You are somebody who I have had a lot of respect for in the coffee industry for an exceptionally long time. We have always had very meaningful, very inspiring conversations. And I'm really glad at this very challenging time in what we're calling the coffee crisis, we get to benefit from all of your wisdom and your experience here in the coffee industry. Folks, in this series, we're talking about the politics in coffee pre and post Houston. As we go through the topics in this series, you'll come to realize why Darrin is the guy to have this conversation with. As we get started on what we're going to talk about in this episode, Darrin, which is how did the specialty coffee industry evolve over the past 30 years? I don't know how we're going to fit that into 20 minutes, but we'll try somehow. But will you remind people what you do and the position that you hold in the industry, please?
Sure, certainly. Well, I currently serve as a consultant with my own business. It's called Cityful Press Coffee Consulting. I do advisory work with roasters, connect producers with roasters here in North America, as well as East Asia, Southeast Asia. And prior to that, I worked as a business partnership manager for Inveritas, a nonprofit committed to verification in supply chain. And the bulk of the last decade, I served as the executive director for the Cup of Excellence and the Alliance for Coffee Excellence. And that's kind of a snapshot. Yeah.
And don't be fooled, folks. This is like one of the most humble people you're going to meet in coffee. He also happens to be one of the most respected and revered people in coffee. He'll never tell you that, but everybody else that knows him will tell you that. So, Darrin, I would like to start this conversation at where we are now, and then we're going to go backwards. So what I mean by that, as we talk about, how did the specialty coffee industry evolve over the past 30 years? What I'd like to ask you is, how do you feel about the industry and where we are at this moment?
I think the one word would be turbulent. For many, many reasons, there seems to be a lot of turbulence, whether it's the C market and pricing and spikes in commodity pricing, whether it's organizations in flux and moving in different directions or new directions, whether it's highly competitive markets such as the U.S. right now in the retail roaster wholesale sector, consolidation. It's also exciting. I think it's exciting, and it's also an opportunity to kind of take a step back and take a breath and just understand that the future is going to be very rapid and quick in terms of direction. So,
And that leads me to our history, right? We know where we are now. Right now, we seem to be at a kind of a precipice, in my opinion, where we're calling it the coffee crisis, where there's a convergence of a whole bunch of stresses that are all finding the coffee industry all at the same time. But we didn't get here overnight. And what I would like to talk to you about in this episode is, let's start with this question. Before specialty was a thing, what was the coffee industry?
Well, before, especially as it pertains to the U.S., before the beginnings of, what would become literally studies and surveys kind of coming out of the National Coffee Association, which was founded in 1901 here in the U.S., we found individual pioneers that really chartered what we would know to be the specialty coffee movement. And when we think about that, we think about Alfred Peet in 1966 in Berkeley, California, starting his coffee shop with no espresso machine, and intentionally. And then we also have Erna Knudsen in 1973 being interviewed in Tea and Coffee magazine and coining the phrase, specialty coffee. Yeah. So it came out of the private sector, right? It came out of individuals who decided they wanted to do something different and unique, and they wanted to label their coffees with a little bit more clarity than just the brand, whether it was Sumatra Mandling or whether it was more specified
Malabar
labeling. Yeah, right. Kopi Luwak. Oh God. But
well done, sir. Well done. And funnily enough, they're all still around today, but we all look back at those coffees as, we cut our teeth on some of those coffees. No pun intended for the Kopi Luwak. But the Monsu Malabar and those kinds of coffees, those are coffees we cut our teeth on in the beginning of our careers in specialty coffee. What were the brands that were the household names before specialty started to become a thing?
Oh, well, you had companies in Chicago, or a company in Chicago, Superior Coffee, which would have been a larger company that actually the two sons of that family company actually moved to Colorado and started Allegro Coffee in 1977.
Did they really?
Yeah, their family, they were second generation coffee roasters, and they came out of that Superior, kind of family to come to Boulder, and then what would be one of the first specialty coffee companies who I was lucky enough to work for in the 80s and 90s and beyond. But I think of some of the craft branded coffees that were out there and happening. I certainly, off the top of my head, think of probably other companies that I think they would have probably been closer to specialty. So,
and there's the international brands, right? There's the Illy's and the Segafredos and the Victoria Coffee. That's in Australia, but there's those main commercial coffee brands that were household as well as being in restaurants. A lot of that was pre-specialty as well.
Yes, and that's Folgers and Maxwell House. And,
exactly.
And Chock full of Nuts. And these are companies that go back, over 100 years. So, yeah. And
so then specialty happens, and then we get the George Howells, we get the, I guess, brands like Intelligentsia and Stumptown and whatnot. They came much later. But in the 70s, you had the beginning of what was specialty coffee happening, right?
Yeah. 71 would be the incarnation of Starbucks early on, and Seattle's Best Coffee would have come out of that. There were emerging companies. I had worked for a company that had began in 77 in Eugene, Oregon, that was a retailer, roaster, wholesale in Oregon. That kind of all of them were, let's say, students of Alfred Peet in a way. I think he kind of cross-pollinated a lot of companies, which really did begin the Starbucks journey. It was out of actual people that moved from Peet's to Starbucks to Jerry Baldwin and Jim Reynolds and those early pioneers of what would be specialty. So, yeah.
And just for any of the folks that are out there wondering, like, why are they talking about the history of coffee if this series is about the politics pre and post Houston? Well, because Houston was a kind of a demarcation that a lot of it really rocked the industry. And so what we want to try and establish in this episode is, how did we get to the moment of what happened in Houston where there was that big announcement of the SCA? Because it really shocked the industry. And I should have said this at the head of the episode, at the top of the episode. It really shocked the industry. And what we want to try and help everyone kind of get a clearer picture of is, how did we arrive at the point of what happens at Houston? Because it's confused a lot of people. And so when we talk about Darrin, we talk about the introduction of specialty coffee. From the introduction of specialty coffee to the time where it starts to become, I hesitate to say mainstream, but it starts to become main street, I guess, where it's not that it's something that is adopted. There's a very clear demarcation that there's a time when it was a thing where we don't know if this thing's going to last, to everybody's, considering, am I going to be commercial or am I going to be specialty? It is a consideration for every business. Around when do you start seeing that happen? Is that the 90s? Is that the noughties? Is that the 2010s? When do you see that as being a thing?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because I think that there were pockets around the U.S., let's say specifically, that were, let's say, epicenters. There was the Bay Area and Berkeley and companies that were emerging. You had the Northwest from Seattle, here in Portland as well. You had roasters on the East Coast like Gillies and Don Schoenholt was the founder or owner of Gillies, but also the founder of the SCA. In looking back at the history and doing a little bit of research, I see this, the gas pedal got pushed down really around 1999 to 2000. And then that decade of the 2000s, it became much more authoritative that there was a specialty coffee movement, and it was a movement. It was not just the early, antecedents of what would become, what everybody would know. And anybody that is reading any information about coffee in the U.S. as a consumer probably has an understanding of what is different from ground coffee in a can to a micro lot or a special coffee offering from their neighborhood roaster. And I see the acceleration. And then, of course, that's when we see the beginnings of what would be called third wave. We see the beginnings of what then would, by 2010, would be direct trade. Already seeing the certification movement pretty entrenched and embedded into the global production side. So I think that was where I would say it was clear that things had become more
differentiated.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right. And so we had from 1990 to 2000. We've got specialty really trying to define itself as very separate from commercial. And then from there, I guess it starts to grow and morph into something that's starting to grow around the world. In the early 2000s is when I joined the specialty. Well, here's an interesting thing. I left my corporate job to do coffee. And I noticed at the time, we didn't have this name, specialty coffee, in Australia yet. No one was calling it specialty coffee. We just knew that it was something that was different. This was 2003. We knew it was different from the rest of it, right? We would say that, like, I'm either going to go and work for somewhere where they were serving Illy or they were serving Segafredo, or I'm going to go and work for an artisan place. We were calling it artisan. And the first question we were asking as baristas, and what we were judging each other on as baristas, was, what kind of coffee do they serve at the place that you work at? It wasn't really about the brewing or anything then. And this is, 22, 23 years ago. And you start to realize, like, oh, now I'm going to different cafes and I'm checking the steaming wand to figure out, like, is it dirty or isn't it dirty? Like, it was back in those days when still that was the way we were differentiating each other. Coffee competitions were shameful to be a part of in Australia at the time. We did not recognise anyone. We had to pull people from what I hear from the stories. Whenever they tried to run a barista competition in Australia, they usually had to pull a few extra people out of the crowd just to make up the numbers. To compete on the spot, right? So this was from the 2000 to 2010 in Australia. This was like the boom for specialty coffee. This was when everybody got it didn't quite happen in Australia this way, but definitely in California. People were getting stylists and getting publicists. He's shaking his head. For anyone who's just listening, he's shaking his head. Tell me I'm lying. Am I lying, Darrin?
No, and book deals and sponsorships and, faces on grinders and
all of it.
Yeah.
And it started to get really weird, right? Like, specialty became this thing that was morphing into something that was a sort of a status symbol, and it started to take on a different meaning. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think what would be considered let's say, if you use the analogy of a countercultural movement, that's what maybe the early part of specialty was, countercultural to commercial coffee, and therefore kind of maybe more revolutionary, more mission driven towards not being the other and differentiating as a culturally, economically, well, in the end, economically, it's become a much bigger market. So yeah, I think it's almost become mainstream, and that could be good or bad depending on what your perspective is. But I mean, if you have a revolutionary movement and it becomes standardized and in a sense mainstreamed, it does lose some of its, oomph and power.
And its essence, right? Like, George Howell was on this podcast and he was talking about the very meticulous efforts they went to educate their customers. They used to hold slideshows back in the day when slideshows were a thing. He would hold slideshows and invite all of his customers to come in and talk to them about naturals and talk to them about wash coffees, and then have a cupping session in between. This is what a natural is. Now go to the back of the room and we'll cup what naturals are. And then they'd sit down and he'd tell them what wash coffees were. And then they'd go back. This was the days, I guess, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s when he was teaching his customers how to adopt specialty coffee, which seems kind of very far away from when you're looking at what we're talking about in the 2000 to 2000 and I guess 20, because it really did start to morph into something different from probably 2015 and on. This became a global industry that was dominated by competitions, whether it be, barista competitions, or it was latte art competitions, or COE, Cup of Excellence, and I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying the commercialization of all of this really did start to take on a warp speed kind of movement. Am I seeing that wrong?
No, and kind of being in that industry at that time. 1999, it seems to be like this pivotal year for me.
Yeah.
Founding of Stumptown, counterculture starting right around that time, intelligentsia starting right around that time, and interacting with a lot of those green coffee buyers primarily, because that's where I would intersect with many of these people and learn what their business plan was and their vision. And I would very much agree that's that window when things started to really heat up. Yeah.
At the time that all of that's happening, what's the price of coffee? What's happening to the price of coffee at that time?
Well, so, when we talk about the coffee crisis that we're still, I think, in, that 2001 is really, when you look at the C market, that's when there was kind of an implosion.
Yeah.
I do recall, and I am not a trader in that sense of really being able to remember all of what was happening, whether it was the frost in 75 or any of the other big things that either increased the price of C. But I do remember, even hearing 68, 70 cents, on the C market, as an incredibly low. Yeah. Wildly low. Yeah. Yeah. And seeing $1.20 as, being considered a fair market. Yeah. $1.60. Oh, more than fair. Even though at that time, the cost of production probably was still well above the 190 range, depending on the country you're working in and fertilizer costs and whatever Brazil was going to be doing with their, inventories and supplies and stocks. And so, yes.
Right. So the picture that we've painted here is that specialty coffee starts around in the 70s and it accelerates and morphs into something that is a hyper commercial endeavor that's filled with bells and whistles and stylists and social media and all that kind of thing. The majority of that time, the producer is getting paid under the cost of production. And as that happens, we come to 2025, or I guess we come to the pandemic in 2020, where the industry really starts to shift quite a lot. So this is where we're going to take the conversation into the next episode, because in the next episode, folks, we're going to talk about, do nonprofits and NGOs actually help producers? So that's a part of this story that we haven't touched on yet, because when I was talking to Darrin about doing this series, I said to him, listen, I don't think that people quite understand the role that nonprofits and NGOs play in this industry. People have started to pay attention because of what's happening with USAID, but we need to include the history of, or the role that NGOs play, and get people to have an understanding of what role that plays. While we're over here doing barista competitions and opening these beautiful, beautiful cafes, there's a whole other part of this industry that people are not aware of. So join us for the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.